Today, going to the beach is almost too easy. You check the weather, you pack bottled water, you bring sandals, sunscreen, snacks, a phone, maybe even a cooler full of food. If the tide changes, there are warning signs. If someone gets pulled too far out, there may be lifeguards, rescue boats, and emergency numbers. Now, remove all of that. No bottled water, no tide chart, no swimming lessons, no sunscreen, no map, no rescue team, no understanding of currents, no idea that the huge shining water in front of you cannot be safely drunk. Suddenly, the beach is not a vacation place. It is a survival puzzle. Most people imagine the first ancient humans seeing the sea and feeling wonder, and maybe they did. But the common belief misses the harsher truth. The sea was not just beautiful. It was salty, moving, unpredictable, and dangerous. The twist is that this dangerous place may also have become one of the richest survival systems humans ever learned to use. So how did ancient humans survive their first encounters with the sea? And why did they stay near something that could feed them, trap them, and kill them? Long before maps, harbors, fishing nets, or stories written on clay, a small band of ancient humans may have reached a place where the world stopped making sense. Behind them were forests, rivers, plains, caves, and the dangerous but familiar paths of animals. In front of them was something different. It moved like a creature. It shone like stone in the sun. It roared like weather. And it stretched farther than any lake they had ever seen. They were not explorers in the modern sense. They did not arrive with a plan to discover a coastline, name it, map it, or claim it. They were families trying to survive. Maybe they had followed a river downstream for days, watching the trees thin and the air grow sharper with salt. Maybe they had tracked animals across changing grasslands until the ground softened underfoot. Maybe they smelled rotting shellfish on the wind before they ever saw the horizon open. They would have carried what mattered: stone flakes, wooden digging sticks, fire if they could keep it alive, skins, fibers, children, old injuries, and memories of places that had failed them. Inland, they understood certain rules. Rivers flowed in one direction. Lakes had edges. Rain came from the sky. Caves stayed still. Trees did not rush toward you. Even danger had patterns. Predators left tracks. Storms had clouds. Cliffs had visible drops. But the sea was different. To people without tide tables, without written knowledge, without a word like oceanography, the shoreline may have seemed almost alive. At one moment, wet sand stretched outward, scattered with shells and pools. Later, the same ground disappeared beneath cold, moving water. A safe path became a trap. A rock that could be reached in the morning might be surrounded by waves by afternoon. The edge of the world did not stay where it was supposed to stay. And then came the first cruel lesson. The water could not be drunk. Imagine the shock of that. After a long journey, after thirst, heat, hunger, and dust, the largest body of water any of them had ever seen lay before them. A child may have reached it first. An adult may have cupped it in both hands. The response would have been immediate: bitterness, salt, coughing, spitting. If desperation pushed someone to drink more, the lesson became harsher. Seawater does not rescue a thirsty body. It makes the crisis worse. Here is the simple modern science. Your body has to keep salt and water in balance. When too much salt enters the bloodstream, your kidneys need extra water to flush it out. But seawater contains more salt than the human body can safely process as drinking water. So drinking it can pull the body deeper into dehydration. The mouth gets dry. The muscles weaken. Thinking becomes foggy. A person surrounded by water can still die of thirst. That is the kind of fact we learn today from survival manuals. Ancient humans learned it the brutal way: taste, sickness, memory, warning. At the beach, we solve thirst with a plastic bottle. For them, the biggest water source in sight was also a trap. So the first encounter with the sea was not simply wonder. It was a survival paradox. Here was more water than the mind could measure, and none of it could solve thirst. To stay near the coast, ancient humans still needed fresh water. Rivers, springs, rain pools, seepages in sand, plants that grew where water hid underground, animal tracks leading back from the shore. The beach could feed them, but it could not replace drinking water. This is where the coast became more complicated than a simple line between land and water. A good shoreline was not just a beach, it was a system. Fresh water might enter from a river. Shellfish might gather on rocks. Birds might nest near cliffs. Fish might move through estuaries, the mixing zones where river water meets the sea. Modern ecology gives us a useful word for this: productivity. Some coastal zones are rich because nutrients move through them. Rivers carry minerals and organic matter. Tides stir shallow water. Mudflats, marshes, and rocky pools become crowded with life. To ancient eyes, it was not ecology. It was a strange place where food kept appearing. Archaeology gives us traces that humans did learn this coastal world. Ancient shell middens, piles of discarded shells left from repeated meals, show that people returned to marine foods again and again. Sites along the southern African coast and other regions suggest that early humans used shellfish, fish, and other coastal resources tens of thousands of years ago. The evidence is incomplete, because many ancient shorelines are now underwater, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Humans did not simply meet the coast and walk away. They learned it, and that learning began with danger. The coastline introduced hazards that inland experience did not fully prepare them for. Rocks near the surf could be slick with algae. Shells could slice bare feet. Sudden waves could knock down even a strong adult. Rip currents, invisible to inexperienced eyes, could drag a person away from shore faster than anyone on land could help. A rip current is not a monster hand pulling straight downward, the way people sometimes imagine. It is more like a fast river moving away from the beach through the surf. Today, swimmers are told not to fight it head-on. Ancient humans had no safety poster explaining that. A person only had to misunderstand the water once. Storms could arrive with a violence unlike inland rain, pushing water over ground that had seemed safe only hours before. Wind stripped warmth from the body. Sun reflected off water and sand. Salt irritated skin and eyes. Strange animals moved in tide pools, mudflats, and shallows. Some harmless, some sharp, some venomous, and some simply unpredictable. Today, a beach warning flag can say, "Do not swim." A weather app can say, "Storm coming." A tide chart can say, "Leave this place before 3 o'clock." Ancient humans had none of that. Their warning system was memory, observation, and the very uncomfortable teacher known as almost dying. And yet, they did not always turn away, because even as the sea threatened them, it also revealed possibilities. Along that unstable boundary were foods that could not run fast, could not hide deep in forests, and sometimes appeared in abundance. Shellfish clung to rocks, crabs moved in pools, fish became trapped in shallows, birds nested nearby, seaweed washed ashore. The same moving water that made the coast dangerous also delivered calories. The answer to why ancient humans stayed near the sea may have been lying right at their feet. Imagine a small group standing at the edge of a retreating tide. A place that had been covered by water only hours earlier is suddenly open to the sky. The rocks shine. Pools tremble with trapped life. Something clicks and scrapes beneath a stone. A shell, sealed tight a moment ago, can be loosened with a sharp flake of rock. A crab can be pinned by careful fingers. A fish, stranded in a shallow pocket, can be taken without chasing it across open ground. For people used to the risks of hunting large animals, the shoreline offered a strange bargain. It was dangerous, yes. Waves could knock a person down. Slippery rocks could break bones. Some creatures could sting, cut, or poison. But many coastal foods did not demand a long chase. They demanded timing, patience, good eyes, and the willingness to learn which small things were worth the effort. That may not sound heroic. No dramatic spear throw. No giant beast falling in slow motion. Just someone squatting on wet rocks, trying not to slip, prying dinner off a shell. But survival is often like that. Less epic battle, more, please do not step on the sharp thing. Shellfish may have been among the first great rewards. Mussels, limpets, clams, oysters, and other mollusks stayed where they were, fixed to rocks or buried in sand. They were protected by shells, but not by speed. With a stone flake, a hammerstone, or a simple wooden tool, ancient people could open a food source rich in protein and minerals. Crabs hid under stones. Seabird eggs appeared in nesting seasons on cliffs or islands. In some regions, edible seaweeds, could be gathered, dried, or eaten fresh. Modern nutrition helps explain why this mattered. Coastal foods can carry protein, minerals, iodine, and fats that are hard to replace in some environments. They are not magic brain food, and they did not make survival easy. But for hungry families, a reliable patch of shellfish could mean children eating when hunting failed. It could mean energy during drought. It could mean a backup plan when inland plants were out of season. And sometimes the sea delivered larger gifts. A dead seal, a beached dolphin, a carcass torn by waves and left on the sand. To us, that image may seem grim. To a hungry group, it could mean fat, meat, bone, hide, and survival. Today, seafood comes cleaned, chilled, and wrapped in a supermarket. For ancient people, seafood arrived with shells, claws, slime, sharp edges, and a very real chance of making a mistake. So the coast had to be learned. One of the earliest lessons must have been the tide. At first, the movement of the water may have seemed like a living thing breathing in and out, or like a danger with no pattern at all. A safe path across wet sand in the morning might vanish by afternoon. A rich patch of shellfish might be underwater before a person could return with others. A rock ledge might look harmless until the sea quietly cut off the way back. Modern science explains tides through the pull of the moon and the sun on Earth's oceans. But ancient humans did not need equations to notice rhythm. They needed repeated experience. They needed someone to remember that when the moon changed, the shore changed too. Day after day, moon after moon, human memory began to do what it has always done best. It found pattern. Low tide exposed the pantry. High tide closed the door. That lesson did not require writing, clocks, or calendars. It required elders pointing, children watching, and groups remembering. It required noticing where the water stopped yesterday, which pools emptied first, which rocks were safe, and when to leave before the sea came back. Today, a tide app solves this. For them, memory had to do the job. Survival on the coast was not about controlling nature. It was about reading it closely enough to move with it. And the sea changed their tools. On open land, tools often had to cut meat, scrape hides, process plants, or help bring down animals. At the shore, the problems were different. Food was small, slippery, hidden, sharp-edged, and time-sensitive. A stone flake could pry a shell from rock. A sharpened stick could probe wet sand for clams. A basket, woven bag, or hide container could carry dozens of small catches back to camp. Fire turned tough shellfish into safer, easier meals, opening shells with heat and making unfamiliar foods more digestible. There is a small science lesson inside that fire. Heat can kill many parasites and microbes. It can soften tough tissues. It can make shells open. It can also help dry or smoke fish, turning one lucky catch into food that lasts longer than a single afternoon. For ancient families, that mattered. A beach full of food is useful. Food that can be carried back, shared, cooked, and saved is a survival strategy. Over time, some groups developed more specialized technologies. Hooks, lines, nets, traps, weirs, and fish fences placed where tides could do part of the work. That is the important part. These were not only tools of force, they were tools of cooperation with a pattern. The tide moved. Fish followed. Humans learned where to wait. This is one reason coastal survival matters so much. It rewarded a different kind of intelligence, not just strength, not just courage. Attention. A hunter on open land reads tracks. A coastal forager reads water. They had to notice bird behavior, wave sound, wind direction, exposed rocks, the smell of rotting seaweed, the color of water, the shape of foam, and the timing of animal movement. Not all at once, not like a scientist with a clipboard. More like a hungry person who knows that missing one sign can ruin the meal, or end the day badly. The way seabirds gathered and dived could reveal fish below the surface. A shift in wind might warn of rougher water coming in. The sound of waves hitting rocks could change before a larger swell arrived. Exposed stones could show where the tide had been and where it would return. Even smell mattered. Rotting seaweed, dead fish, and stranded animals could mean danger, but also opportunity. A strong smell might lead scavengers to food or warn them away from spoiled flesh and disease. Dark clouds gathering low over the horizon might mean a storm was coming long before rain reached the land. Today, we call some of this environmental knowledge. For ancient people, it was not a subject in school. It was how you kept children away from the wrong pool, found food before another group did, and made it back before the water cut off the route. And this knowledge did not live only inside one person. It had to be passed on. Imagine a child crouched beside an elder at low tide, watching hands move carefully over sharp shells. The lesson might not be spoken in full sentences. It might be a gesture. Do not touch that one. Step here, not there. Wait for the wave to pull back. Keep your body turned toward the water. Never trust the sea when your back is turned. That last rule probably saved lives. It also sounds like something every beach parent still says, just with fewer stone tools and more towels. A child would learn which shells could slice skin, which pools sometimes held trapped fish, which creatures stung or bit, and which shellfish could be gathered quickly before the tide returned. They would learn through imitation, warning, story, laughter, fear, and repetition. One mistake might become a lesson for the whole group. One close call might be remembered for years. This is how coastal knowledge became cultural memory, not written down, carried in bodies, scars, habits, and the timing of a walk to the shore. Because the sea punished ignorance quickly. Some people almost certainly drowned. Some were knocked from rocks by waves that seemed to come from nowhere. Some may have eaten unfamiliar foods that made them sick, or trapped themselves on exposed ground as the tide rose behind them. And food itself carried hidden risks. Shellfish can concentrate toxins from algae blooms. Spoiled sea animals can make people sick. A tide pool can look like a grocery shelf and still contain danger. Modern science has names for these problems. Ancient people had memory. This season, not that shell. This smell, do not eat. This pool, safe last time. This one, no. That kind of knowledge is not primitive. It is data, stored in stories and habits instead of spreadsheets. Coastal life was not a simple upgrade from inland survival. It was a bargain. The food was rich, but the margin for error was thin. Fire changed that bargain. With fire, shellfish could be cooked, making them safer and easier to digest. Fish could be roasted, dried, or in some places smoked, stretching a catch beyond a single meal. Warmth mattered after cold water, wind, and rain. A beach fire was more than a cooking tool. It was a center of activity. People could open shells, repair stone tools, scrape hides, watch the dark water, and exchange information about what they had seen that day. Around those fires, the coastline became not just a place of survival, but a place of teaching. And once humans understood one coast, they could follow another. This is where the story gets bigger. A single beach is a campsite. A chain of beaches can become a route. Shores can act like corridors, long ribbons of food and fresh possibility. Shellfish beds, estuaries, fish runs, seabirds, driftwood, and freshwater streams often repeat along the edge of continents. Not exactly the same everywhere, but familiar enough that learned skills could travel with people. This is one reason researchers have long debated the role of coastal migration in the spread of ancient humans into new regions. Some of the paths they may have followed are now drowned beneath rising seas, hidden offshore by thousands of years of changing climate and water levels. That missing evidence matters. Many of the oldest shorelines are gone. After the Ice Age, sea levels rose dramatically, drowning beaches, campsites, hearths, and shell piles that may have preserved the earliest chapters of coastal survival. So, when we talk about ancient humans and the sea, we have to be careful. We are not holding the complete story. We are looking at surviving traces and asking what they suggest. Still, the idea is powerful. The sea did not only stop people. Sometimes, its edge may have guided them. And at some point, after generations of watching the water, humans may have asked a dangerous new question. Could the sea itself be crossed? To step into the surf was one kind of courage. To step beyond it was another. For a long time, the sea must have looked like a boundary drawn by the world itself. It moved, it roared, it took the careless. But ancient people were careful watchers. They saw branches float. They saw whole trees washed down rivers and carried along the coast. They saw mats of reeds, tangled roots, perhaps even dead animals drifting in from somewhere unseen. The water did not only destroy, sometimes it carried. That realization may have been one of the quietest revolutions in human history. No one needed to invent a perfect boat in one brilliant afternoon. The first experiments may have been messy, frightened, and half accidental. A person clinging to driftwood after a flood, a bundle of reeds pushed across a lagoon, animal skins stretched over a frame, a log used to reach a sandbar, then a nearby island, then something farther. In other words, not ancient shipbuilding genius on day one. More like, this floats, nobody panic, let us see if it still floats tomorrow. Curiosity would have mattered. So would hunger. So would desperation. When a group needed shellfish on the other side of an inlet, or escape from danger, or new ground after a coastline changed. And somewhere in deep time, humans did cross water that could not simply be walked around. One of the strongest clues comes from Sahul, the ancient landmass that once joined Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania when sea levels were lower. Humans reached this world tens of thousands of years ago. Even during periods of lower seas, there were still water gaps between Southeast Asia and Sahul. The exact route is debated. The vessels themselves have vanished, made from wood, bark, reeds, or other materials that rarely survive for such immense spans of time. But the human presence is there, and it implies something extraordinary. It implies planning. It implies that groups move together, not just isolated wanderers blown off course. It implies knowledge passed from one person to another. When winds changed, where currents pulled, whether birds flew toward land, whether distant islands could be seen on clear days from high ground. Modern navigation uses compasses, satellites, depth charts, and engines. Ancient navigation, if we can call it that, may have begun with the oldest instruments humans had: eyes, memory, stars, wind, birds, currents, and fear managed just well enough to keep moving. These were not maps in the modern sense. They were living maps, stored in memory, gesture, story, and repeated risk. The sea expanded the human mind because it forced people to imagine what they could not touch. A horizon is not like a hill or a forest. It hides its answer. It asks you to believe that there may be something beyond the visible world. For ancient humans, that blue distance may have become a place of fear, but also possibility. Fish moved with seasons. Birds appeared and disappeared. Stars rose over dark water in reliable patterns. Landmarks along the shore became guides. The ocean taught attention on a scale larger than a single valley, and it likely changed the inner life of people as much as their diet. The sea had moods. It gave food, then took lives. It returned objects from unknown places. It made sounds in darkness. It erased footprints. It brought storms from beyond the edge of sight. Today, science explains waves, tides, salinity, currents, weather, and marine ecosystems. But explanation does not make the sea small. Even now, with satellites and forecasts, the ocean can surprise us. For ancient humans, that surprise was not background scenery. It was part of daily survival. Long before written mythology, it is easy to imagine the sea becoming a presence in human thought. Not just water, but power. Something to respect, speak about, warn children about, perhaps sing to, perhaps fear, in dreams. But the beginning of this relationship was not grand. Before sailors, before kingdoms, before trade routes and harbors and ships with names, there were families on beaches trying to stay alive. Someone knew which rocks held mussels at low tide. Someone knew where freshwater seeped near dunes. Someone remembered the pool where small fish could be trapped when the tide fell. Someone pulled a child back from the breaking waves. Someone watched the sky and smelled rain before a storm came in from the open water. Humanity's bond with the sea was probably built from countless small acts like these: hunger, caution, memory, a shell cracked open with a stone, a fire kept burning against the wind, a path learned between camp and tide pool, a warning repeated until even the youngest understood it. Picture one of those ancient shorelines at dusk. The air cools, smoke bends low over the sand, shells split in the firelight, and people eat with tired hands while the waves continue their endless work beyond the camp. An older adult watches the dark water with suspicion. A child watches it with wonder. Not without fear, just with a little less fear than the generations before. That is how survival changes a species. Not by conquering the world all at once, but by learning one danger at a time. The first discovery of the sea was not a single moment. It was a long conversation between danger and survival, between the shore that fed people and the water that threatened to take them. The sea began as a wall, salty, unstable, impossible to drink, and ready to punish mistakes. But for ancient humans who watched closely, remembered carefully, and taught the next generation, that wall slowly became something else. A pantry, a path, a warning system, a teacher, dangerous, generous, and impossible to ignore.